It's so cool! It's the bee's knees, it's the cat's pajamas!
Whoa. This isn't one of those project bikes that we have just to fix up and sell. This is one of our personal long-term projects. This started life as my first mountain bike, my kind of beginner thing when I was really getting into it. And then it's gone through Dan and Avi, and it's been a loaner bike for a few other people. And now it's just our general build it up into something awesome project. In this episode of Project Used Bikes, we're going to show you how this thing went from just an old beater bike that we got for 200 bucks to this wonderful beast.
I'm going to start with some context. For the longest time, I rode exclusively BMX bikes. I even took them on some group rides through the trails. It really wasn't easy to keep up, but our groups have such a big mix of riding styles and skill levels that I managed. After a while though, I caved to the pressure to get a big bike. If you've seen my defense of used bikes video, you know I love saving old bikes. I think all bikes have tons of potential, so I didn't really want anything fancy. And so I found this 2005 Pajamis Durango for 200 bucks. Most of the parts were in good shape and just need a little bit of adjustment to run properly. Everything looked to be original except for the tires and the chain. I can't find a ton of info on the bike other than the original catalog, but according to one website that I found, it's the JKS11 color option instead of the JKN3 saying in the catalog, and I know that doesn't make any real difference, but it's kinda cool to know. This bike came with a 9-speed Dior drivetrain from Shimano, a Manitou fork, and mechanical disc brakes. In my opinion, it was more than enough for a beginner bike for me. I thrashed this thing like it was a BMX. It saw bad conditions, it got crashed, it got jumped, it got wheelied, and it generally got given a real workout. All I had to do was change the rear derailleur when the original one broke. I didn't change much about the bike, but when Dan got a hold of it, he decided it needed some upgrades. The exact details are pretty complicated, but the TLDR version is we split a fairly high-end used bike and we each took the parts we wanted. The Pajamis got a RockShox Pike fork, 140mm of travel with a through axle. It got a new wheel set, it got a 10-speed 1x drivetrain with a narrow wide, and it got a dropper post. Dan clearly spent the most money on this deal, but it was still clearly way less than buying a new bike with a similar setup. Dan beat on this bike just as hard as I did, and it never even flinched with the new parts.
Oh my god, dude! Are you okay? Bro. Your bike light is all the way up there. All came out of my teeth.
I'm so glad he's okay, and I'm so glad we got that on camera. That was beautiful.
I think I cracked my wrist.
Oh, did you?
Avi is the most recent mountain biker to have the bike, which everybody now calls the Pajamis. He has a BMX and fixed gear background, so he's picking up pretty quickly on all the skills. Last year he had a specialized hard rock, which was a slightly more basic build but had unreal brakes on it. Once he moved those Avid Juicy carbons to the Pajamis, it officially became his bike. This bike is a beast among 26-inch hardtails, but it's set up for Dan and myself, and Avi is half a foot taller than we are. This bike is a size large, so we switched out the stem for something nice and short for the two of us. Abby feels a little cramped on the bike, so we're going from 55 to 90 millimeters. It's close to the original geometry of the bike, so it should be a good baseline for adjusting the fit in the future. The dropper post is a cool feature that a lot of modern bikes have. It gives the rider a much better range of motion when riding aggressive trails, but it doesn't impair pedaling. In this case, we're taking it off temporarily to test some different saddles and seat heights. By using a rigid post and riding in a more fixed position, we'll be able to get a better feel for how his saddle and cockpit fit. Once we have that all dialed in, we'll put the dropper post back. All that's left for this episode is to take the bike out where it should be, on the trails. It's winter, so it's going to be tough, but we're happy to do it anyways. Riding in the snow is the weirdest feeling. The ground is hard where it's normally soft, it's slippery where it's normally wet, and it's snowy where it's normally smooth. It's like relearning how to ride trails. Normal mountain bikes are more than capable of handling the amount of snow we get in the Toronto area. Fat bikes can be fun, but for around here, I think these are more than good enough. So, normally we ride the Culham Trail. This is not the Culham Trail. Despite what I said about not needing fat bikes, it's too warm and slushy, so the trails are a mess. This is just a little side path near the shop. Even so, we got a good chance to test this setup and dial in the fit a little bit.
Whew. It's bumpy out here.
This bike handles snow like a monster truck, and is still nice and responsive when you want to throw it around.
Doing a bike swap!
Despite its age and relatively low budget build, the Pajamis rides like a modern high-end hardtail. Abby has decided to lock in this setup, so I'm going to put the dropper post back on and we'll be ready for trails all season long. And that's how the Pajamis came to be. I love the idea of recycling old bikes, because I feel like they all have a ton of potential, and they can all last basically forever if they're given the right kind of TLC. Even though my job is to sell new bikes, I think every cyclist should get to know their own bike better by working on it. And a great way to do that is to buy a used bike and work on that so you don't accidentally mess up your A bike. On top of all the other benefits of cycling, working on your bike is a great way to get comfortable with hand tools, and that opens up the door for all kinds of other important life skills. The next time you see the Pajamis in an episode of Project Used Bikes, I plan to test it against my more modern but not quite as high-end 29er, just to see which one actually rides better. Now, they're both relatively affordable bikes, but I just want to see if the old bike actually does ride as well as I think it does. The next episode, however, is going to be about urban cycling. I found this old, beautiful, mint condition Nishiki, and it's a perfect urban bike. Proper chromoly steel frame and everything, it's beautiful. And I plan to talk about how fun it is just to ride around in an urban environment. So that's it for this episode. If you made it this far, thanks, I appreciate it. And shout out to Brianna, if you're watching, you're cool.